attendee numbers.
Good afternoon, everyone. We'll begin the webinar, the town hall, in a few minutes. We're waiting for registered attendees to enter into the town hall. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll begin in a few minutes with the town hall. We're waiting for more registered attendees to sign in. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll begin the town hall. Thank you all for joining us today for the Student Senate for California Community College COVID-19 Student Challenges Town Hall. A few housekeeping items I'd like to cover. the town hall is being recorded and will be archived on the Student Senate website. That's studentsenateccc.org website after the town hall. All audience members are on mute. You could ask questions through the Q&A at the bottom of the ribbon on the bottom of your screen. We'll be entertaining questions at the end of the presentation. You do not need to raise your hands to be acknowledged. That function has been turned off. Just go ahead and type in your question in the Q&A. If you need closed captions, click down below on the icon to see the closed captions. And with that, I'd like to introduce Danny Thirakul, the president of the Student Senate for California Community Colleges.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I want to thank all of you for the time out of your afternoon to really sit down, listen to some of these stories, listen to our results, and get to know exactly what are the challenges happening with students across the state. As most of you know, COVID-19 has impacted a lot of things, including how students are going to receive their education. And because of that, we as an organization recognize that, and we created a survey in order to gauge exactly what those challenges are. We had almost 1,700 responses, about 1,690. And we are so proud and so grateful to have so many responses to that survey, and we're happy to share that with you today. So just a brief overview of what we're going to be going over today, the agenda. We're going to go over the results. We're going to explain some of the key data points that we have found, the most pressing issues. And then, of course, all of them are pressing, but we just want to highlight just a few key ones as they do stand out. You can access our full report on our website on our communications tab. You can download the full version and the full report on our website at www.studentsenateccc.org. All right, after the reporting of the results, we'll be moving on to our student panel. We have a few students with us today that we'll introduce who are very brave for sharing their stories with us today, being able to be so vulnerable with us. And we hope that you listen to their stories very accurately and try to gauge exactly what's happening to them. They have, I've talked to them previously already, and I assure you, you'll be able to really resonate with what these students have to say. So I appreciate for them being here, and I know you'll enjoy that student panel portion. Afterwards, we're gonna go straight into kind of what the SSEE is committed to do in terms of our advocacy, and then what we recommend some of the faculty and administrators that are online, kind of what we ask you all to do as a response to this survey and these results. Next slide, please. So as you can see from this slide here, this kind of gauges exactly where we got our responses from. So like I said, we had about 1,700 responses, 1,690 participants participate, 64 colleges throughout the state, and each region in the Student Center for California Community Colleges is represented here in this survey. One thing that I do want to point out is that this survey was only able to be completed by students who had access to internet, who had access to a laptop, and were able to actually complete the survey. So while we may not be able to engage those students who don't have those resources, I think you can all understand that these numbers that we have are, I guess, fairly conservative. These numbers, are much higher in reality because of that. So I hope that you take that into mind as we go through this survey. Next slide, please. So here is what we have in terms of the challenges that our students are facing. Now, they're not all encompassing. These are just the ones that we've provided. We also have free responses, which we'll get into later. But here are some of the key results that we have found and that we would like to share with you. 67% of those responded said that they had higher levels of anxiety, stress, depression, and other mental distress than usual. Right? A lot of students are facing a lot more extra coursework because faculty members are, want to make sure that they understand the materials, so they have increased workloads. They have to balance between, their multiple schedules and their learning environment in order to switch to an online education, and that has contributed a lot to, those high levels of stress. But we're going to get more into that later on and look at the key determinants of what that is. Other key data points is that 41% has said that besides having to adapt to online learning, that they're doing well overall. And I don't want to mislead you in that it's not that they're doing well. It's besides having to adapt to the online learning. So if you just excuse me 1 second, I realized that I have a train. I live next to a train track, so I'm going to close my window just really briefly. Sorry about that. Hopefully that's better. So where was I? Let's see here. Oh yeah, so besides having to adapt to online learning, so there are challenges still that the students are facing, even though they have clicked, overall doing all. Just a disclaimer there, that was the first choice in our survey. So many students probably felt like, oh, they were overall doing well and clicked that as their first choice. But then when they read the other boxes, they said, oh, well, I'm actually also facing all of these other challenges as well. So just a small disclaimer, but we'll get into that later in the presentation. Next is that 40% of the students that took this survey stated that they had a loss of income. So they have lost either their employment, or their on-campus employment, or just their stipends from internships and things like that. And that has really hurt them in trying to, do their education, complete their education in order to cover some of those basic needs and non-tuition based costs. And I just want to point out too quickly before we move on to the next slide, 22% have stated that they had to drop at least one course or more. And that has been fairly consistent throughout the state because of this increased workload, because of the lack of resources, that they're unable to do these courses, that they do need to drop out of a few of them because they're unable to just take these classes. And I know that our student panelists could probably talk to some of those challenges later on. Next slide, please. So here's the breaking down the actual correlation between one answer to another. So if you look at this one, out of the 67% that responded that they had experienced high levels of stress, anxiety, depression, other mental distress than usual, 45% of those responded also checked that they were experiencing loss of income, which is the prime determinant of why they're experiencing those high levels, right? They lost their income. That is the most impactful thing that's happening to our students that causing that high levels of stress. A second indicator was that 27% indicated that they were unable to pay mortgage, rent, or utilities, right? Covering those kind of basic needs. Again, a very common theme throughout the entire survey in these results. 26% stated that they were having to drop one or more courses due to financial or other reasons. Again, these results are not, a shock, of course. They're pretty much what we expected to see in terms of what is happening to our students. Next slide. See here. There we go. Oh. There we go. So of those, what is this? High levels of stress during overall? Oh, yes. So, sorry, I'm going a little lost here in my slides. So of the 41% that responded and selected besides having to adapt to online learning and doing overall over well, 43 of those that responded to that question or that challenge also stated that they were experiencing high levels of stress and anxiety and depression. And I want to note that at first, the two responses might seem at odds with each other, but based on the comments from the respondents that you'll see later, students are doing well. The high level of anxiety appears to be caused by these online environment and other life circumstances. Again, the student panel will definitely be able to go into depth about what exactly that means and what's happening with our students. Next slide, please. And one of the questions we also asked was, how can the SSCCC help, right? The last question we asked was, how can we as an organization help you individually as a student? And 22% responded with just essentially assistance, financial aid, or needed grants and funding. And that has been a very consistent theme. 19% responded with comments about how to make online courses better for students. and then 13% provided other comments related to advocacy, communication, or community. And as you can see from the graph here below, right here, of course, mental health is still on the board as well. Equipment, Wi-Fi technology is still also a challenge that students are facing, and they need access to in order to complete their education. I would just want to point out that, as an organization, of course, we are going to do everything that we can in our abilities to make sure that these things are addressed and are elevated. So I really appreciate all of you all for attending this webinar in Town Hall so that you can understand what those challenges are. Next. So in conclusion, students are struggling with the move to online-only environment. Particularly, there's a lack of services normally provided through the campus, such as the library, such as counseling, EOPS, DSPS, again, on-campus jobs, or the jobs that are connected to a college's career center because they have partnerships with their local community and offer employment to students, financial aid, and health services being one of those key things that students are asking for. Other things students are needed for are students who do well in courses held face-to-face may not be doing well in online environments. Online courses absolutely are much harder to do than in-person courses, which means that they require a lot more attention and a lot more resources in order to make sure that a student is being successful. And then lastly, the need for additional resources to help students transition, such as clear expectations, ability to engage with faculty more frequently and visually, and consistency in learning experience, including with Canvas and leniency. Of course, our student panel will go over that through a lot of these things. I think you'll learn a lot from exactly what they have to say. I'm excited for all of you to listen to them. And so at this point, I would like to transition over to our Vice President of Regional Affairs for the SSCCC, the Student Center for California Community Colleges, Manan, who will be our moderator for the student panelists and who will be introducing our panels.
Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Minh and I'm really glad to join you all today. I'll be taking over the student panel. And so to start off, from the data that were collected, we can see that the community college students across California are experiencing many similar challenges when it comes to this transition to online learning, and as well as just coping with their life with this pandemic going on. And there might even be challenges that were not recorded or showed on the data, because there are many students who might have not had the opportunity to participate on the survey. And each student is placed in such a unique and different situation that not many other people experience. And from this panel, we'll be able to hear directly from the individual student stories, and they might not have been the perfect representation of all the California community college students facing right now. But we hope that through these individual student stories, we'll be able to show the different aspects of what are the specific stories that are facing by the students so that we can better advocate for the needs of the students. And joining me today, we have 4 students from the different parts of California. So first of all, we have Leonardo Gonzalez. He's a political science and communications major. And then we have Cora Martinez, also a poli-sci and Chicano studies major. And we have Genevieve Kolar, who is an urban planning major, and we have Steve Hoang, who is a biochemistry major. So thank you so much for joining me at the panel today. And we're gonna go ahead and get started with the questions. Okay. So the first question, please briefly share with us how the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted you as a California community college student. So I'm gonna go ahead in the order that is shown on the screen. We're gonna start with Leo then.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me here today. So like you mentioned, my name is Leonardo Gonzalez. I am a political science and communications major. The way that the COVID-19 epidemic has really impacted me as a community college student is that it's a very big adjustment to take on. Me personally, I usually take about 17 units per semester. That's to keep me, just to ensure that I meet all my criteria to transfer out in a 2-year period. And having to transfer all my units to an online environment is something that I was never prepared for. I am used to taking online courses, 1 or 2 per semester, but now taking all my courses, it was a huge readjustment and a huge, a struggle to be able to, motivate myself to continue to pursue my commitment to my education. Um, like the studies have shown, I am also a student who did withdraw from one of my classes, and that was my math class, my statistics class, to be more detailed. Because that class does require a lot more interaction with the professor and with students, and it's very difficult to really comprehend math, especially someone like myself who struggled with math my entire life. It's very hard to ask all these questions on a Zoom call, which is why I thought it was best in my personal interest to just withdraw from my math class and be committed to, succeeding in my other courses, which are a little bit more doable online since they do fall into my major. And those are a little bit more independent courses because they're more of a from your own perspective type of course. So students have really been forced to, and well, everyone has really been forced to really adjust, and not just their academia, but their way of living, their way of going about things, because it takes more from a student to do homework, classwork, and your regular life all in one building than in for you to just go into your classroom and sit down and be there in the moment. It takes a lot more motivation to really keep students engaged and keep us focused during this very difficult time.
Okay, how about you, Cora?
Okay, thank you. I was waiting to get unmuted. So hello, as mentioned, my name is Coraima Martinez, but I also go by Cora. I'm a political science and Chicano studies major, and I'm actually supposed to be talking about this at a student-led panel tomorrow. My mental health has been greatly affected by COVID-19. And just to reiterate, even though Danny gave these statistics, I just want to reiterate these statistics and talk about how you can match the statistics to this phase. So as Danny mentioned, and as the data mentioned, 67% of students have heightened levels of anxiety, depression, and mental stress. I'm one of those students. I was taking advantage of the on-campus resources and seeking therapy, and ELAC provides amazing mental health resources, but that does not translate well online. I, as a student who has sought out mental health and mental health resources on campus before, I don't know where to go online, and where I do go, I find that I'm not getting the same help that I got, and it's not the same. And being able to go into someone's office and have that private time for yourself between whoever you're speaking to, therapist, or if you're in group therapy, many a times as community college students, we live with multiple people, and we don't have the privilege of being able to have a room or a house to ourselves where we can fully unload what is going on in our heads, what we are dealing with in our everyday life. And being as I am a first-gen Latina student, in the Chicanx Latinx culture, mental health is very much stigmatized. And many students, I have so many friends that can attest to this, we can't talk about certain things in our home with our parents. We get shut down, or we're not allowed the safe space to talk about these things. So then who can we turn to if now we cannot turn to on-campus resources? 40% of students are experiencing income loss. That greatly adds to our negative mental health, our anxiety, our depression, our mental stress. We have students that are not only student workers on campus, like Leo, I know he is a student worker on campus. I am a student worker on campus, but we also have students that are now working off campus while simultaneously working on campus, or had to pick up another job because their parents are getting laid off. So then it makes it really hard to want to put in the effort and the care into your studies when you're struggling to pay rent, when you don't know how you're going to put food on the table, when you have to pick up the extra slack, because if not, then you're out on the street. And with a pandemic, how can you allow that to happen? 22% of students had to drop classes due to financial issues or personal reasons. Leo said he is one of those students that had to drop a class. I am one of those students that had to drop a class, and I actually had to drop a major class. as a double major in Chicano studies, I had to drop a Chicano studies class, and it broke my heart because I love that professor, but I just can't take it because I wasn't prepared for this, and many professors weren't either. There's struggle on both sides, and it seems like at times there's no answer, or the answers that we're getting, they're coming as they're being found. So it also makes it harder because then students don't know what to expect. Professors also don't know what to expect. Administrators also don't know what to expect. And the unknown, it makes it very, very scary for first-gen students, for low-income students. That is what I had to say.
Okay, thank you, Kolar. So how about you, Genevieve? How has this transition affected you?
I'm sorry, I had some trouble unmuting. Hi everyone, thank you for being here and for having me here. So I am pretty fortunate that I also have an on-campus job, but I was able to do it remotely. But for me, the transition to online has been really, really difficult as well. I have a learning disability, and there really has been very little room for accommodation, and you see this reflected in the survey as well, that there has been an accessibility issue that I've heard from other students, like there won't be recordings of a Zoom lecture, or there won't be transcripts, which are really helpful to follow along, or if you're hard of hearing, they're necessary. Just basic stuff like that. But for me, my classes have been either more difficult than usual, and also totally devoid of social interaction. Like they won't have Zoom or breakout rooms or anything like that. And so for me, I really benefited from being able to be face-to-face with the professor, with my classmates, and engage in that way. And so I would say that in general, mental health is also a major effect on me, just having to deal with other responsibilities like getting groceries and doing cleaning and stuff for my dad, who I don't live with and who is immunocompromised, and taking on that huge load of stress. Like Danny mentioned, the survey doesn't represent all students necessarily, and is probably a little conservative, because the students who are the hardest hit are the ones who are low income, who've been laid off or have their parents laid off, and who are, on having to take on lots of extra jobs and just not able to either connect to the internet or have time to take surveys. And so for us at least, or for me, just the total uncertainty, knowing that there isn't really any major accommodation for grades, and that we're kind of expected to continue business as usual when all of this stuff is going on. And I'm supposed to be transferring in the fall, and I don't know. I also dropped a class this quarter, and I don't know if, it might jeopardize my graduation and my transfer in the fall. And just, there's so many students for whom this is going to mean slowing down. And we know that in the community college system, you already have to go slower, if you're working jobs or you have responsibility to your families. And the longer it's taking you to complete your degree, the less support you have, the less access to financial aid and the promise and everything. And it makes it way more likely that you're not going to stay in school. And then beyond that, we have less and less prospects for jobs when we get out of college. So I feel like that's weighing really heavily on me. It's hard to find the same kind of motivation as a normal. Right now we're in the quarter system, so I'm still completing my term till the end of June, and it is so hard to focus on that and be worried about the future and deal with harder class loads than usual.
Yeah, I can totally resonate with that, because I'm a tutor in an English class, and there have been so many, usually there are only around 10 students in the class that would like use my tutoring session. But now all of a sudden the professor doesn't even host Zoom session. And every Sunday she would email out a long email with all the assignments, and she would not have class session, and she would assign homework. And then all the students, they don't know what to do. And when they try to schedule Zoom meetings with her, she doesn't hold Zoom meetings. So they would need to reach out to me, and I'm working more hours than I was actually assigned to work for this class, just because everyone is needing support for their homework. And then we have Steve. How about your situation?
Hi everyone, my name is Steve. I'm a student from De Anza College. I'm not sure if you can you see me right now? Okay, whatever. Anyways, I'm probably one of the fewer students who actually enjoy the format of online classes. However, that does not mean that this transition has been any easier on me. Because of the pandemic, I feel like all of us students have had to really shift our priorities. Including me. I've had to really rearrange hours for work. I'm the oldest child in my family, and so I'm and I'm also the healthiest one in my family, and so I'm automatically the caretaker in the family, and so I have to look over my grandpa and my mom, my little brother, and all these things. The reason why I like the format of online classes is because fortunately, my professors right now have allowed for a lot of flexibility, but I know that a lot of other students don't have that same type of flexibility. And something like
It looks like he was muted.
Yeah.
Well, while we try to get him back on, I do want to quickly touch on one of the things that he has said, and something that relates back to our survey is a lot of our students have people they need to take care of. We had around just above 20% of students who had to do children homeschooling. So they have kids and they have to homeschool their own children or homeschool their siblings because their schools have also shut down and they can't get the services or daycare that they need in order for them to have their time to focus on their education. So I think that was a very important topic that he also touched on, is that a lot of us have dependents, the people that depend on us to take care of them as well.
Yeah. So through your answers so far, I've noticed one topic that's mentioned a lot is about the transition to online learning. So if there is one thing that you think can be changed to improve your online learning experience, what would be that change that you would need? So I guess we'll start with Leo first.
Yeah, so one of my things that I would immediately change to help the learning environment would be the way that we structure our courses, right? I know for a lot of our major prep courses, we are expecting a lot from our students. That should really change because now our students are not only facing, their academia struggles, they're facing life struggles, right? I know a lot of students who have faced, that their parents or their siblings have been, affected with COVID-19, and they have to separate homes. I know families that have to build walls in between their own home to separate one side of the home so one family member can quarantine themselves, while the other side of the family has to, live business as usual, right? Um, so the way that our courses are expected for students to succeed has to change. Faculty has to understand that students are just like faculty, right? We have a family. We might or might not have children, but we have siblings. The majority of us, right? So we have parent responsibilities in a way because we have to take care of our younger siblings. We have to take care of our parents, make sure they're working. Take care of the home duties at home, and now that everything's online, there really is no time to be, on your desk or, on your computer watching a course for an hour and a half or sometimes over 2 hours without having to run and take care of something and then come back, So we're doing so many things at once that we have to change the way that we expect students to succeed and make it very flexible, that students are able to still understand the concept of the topic and really, absorb the knowledge, the information that's being given, but also let students, submit things at their own pace, and let students understand that we are here because of an epidemic that no one was expecting, but we are still going to do everything possible to let students succeed during this, transition, and that you are here as a support system, not someone that may or may not care about what's going on. We are all struggling. We are all going through something that we never been through, and students have a lot more pressure because their future of their education is currently on the line. They have to, succeed in order so they can transfer out, get their degree, and get the career that they are desperately needing and what they want to accomplish in life. So we have to restructure the way that we educate to allow students to succeed during this very difficult time.
And then for the other panelists, do you want to add on that? I thought that was a really good answer, but any other things that you would like to add?
I would actually like to answer a question that was asked in the Q&A by Professor Antoinette Azon. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Their question was, did anyone take classes where faculty met with students in Zoom during normal class times? How was that experience? Yes, my math professor, but being that he is on the older side and he has never taught online before, there are a lot of technical difficulty issues, he has also never been a professor that had a Canvas. Oh, we're not going to be taking questions. Okay, I'm sorry, I just wanted to adjust that just because there's also that disconnect, and that has to do with accessibility to students. It makes students not want to be as engaged because they don't know what's going on. If the professor is seemingly like they don't know what's going on, and it's not the professor's fault, it's because he is new or they are new to this entire system, just the way that students are new. So we, in many ways, are understanding that it's a shift for you as well as it is a shift for us, and it is a relearning or a learning for you as it is for us. And therefore, we have like the leniency, and we are not breathing down your necks and being like, okay, I need this, I need that, professor this, professor that, and sending a million emails. It would be we appreciate it for professors to have leniency. And I would also like to give a few examples of what leniency would be. My professor, and I appreciate that effort, but my professor thinks that doing a kind of a review with us before the test is like leniency. So when we get a bad score on our test, he gets mad at us and says, well, hey, I did a review with you, so you should understand this. So if you're not getting it right, then it's your fault. And that's not true, because one, many of us already struggle with math. I personally have retaken that math course already twice. And it's not because I'm not studying, it's because I'm just not someone who is good at math, and to not be able to see him in his office hours or have breakout rooms or anything like that, or be able to get math tutoring when I need it is really hard. And that's the reason why I'm not doing good on tests. That's the reason why many of us are not doing good on tests. That's one of the reasons why I believe Leo said that he had to drop his math class, or he was considering dropping it. I forget which one it was, but so many of our students are affected. So the leniency would be maybe having less questions, or maybe not grading as hard, or having breakout rooms maybe then. But I see the effort that is being put to try to create leniency, but our professors have to understand that at times that isn't leniency, and we're not just sitting around at our houses all day. As many of our professors, I've had a professor that's been like, well, why isn't this done? You have all day. And it's like, well, no, I'm also a student worker, and I have people in the home I have to take care of, and I'm just like you, I'm living through a pandemic and I'm dealing with mental health issues. I deal with severe anxiety and depression, and I'm dealing with a lot of loneliness and isolation because the community that I have built on campus isn't there for me anymore because we're not on campus.
Yeah. Okay. And then Genevieve, you wanted to share something, right?
Yeah, well, what I have to say goes along with what Cora and Leo already said, which is that I think we really need to work on having kind of universal changes to grading policies. And, you know, I think something that's come to the forefront with this pandemic is all of the disparities in education have really jumped out. But I think we can probably all attest to this, that there have been emergencies for students every day, like all the time before the pandemic. We have so many students who were housing insecure, who were homeless, who are getting by because they had resources like they could go to school and study at the library or use the computer there, or go to tutoring there. And like Cora said, having the supportive environment that's centered around your studies and academics, and where you can have friends and like support there as well. So I think for grading policies, what they're doing at most places, I think, is saying that it's really up to the professor to decide on a case-by-case basis. And that, first of all, puts more pressure on the individual professor because they have to make this distinction, and it's a big deal. But also it means that students have to come forward with their circumstances and, you know, describe whatever difficult thing they're dealing with or whatever they can't focus. And maybe they're just, a big component of that is the coursework or the way that it's set up, and that it doesn't, you know, like they're not getting the same level of interaction and teaching than they normally would. Or maybe a big component of that is mental health or just stress in their family life and stuff that they shouldn't necessarily have to talk about. So what I would say would need to change is just, and someone mentioned this in a question, that it is also like our grading policies are so affected by, you know, the UCs and the transfer institutions and, you know, the people that we are trying to target with our vocational certificates and stuff like that. But I know that at least in my college and our region that, well, we've known for a really long time that grades tend to reflect a lot of factors that are more about, you know, privilege and stability, and that students can, you know, there's just so many other factors that affect grades that we need to make big changes to account for them and not do a case-by-case basis where students are expected to come forward, especially because the most vulnerable students, the ones who are struggling the most, often experience the most shame around what they're going through and are least likely to self-advocate and ask for more help, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'd say just,
I wanted to say that is an extremely important point, that a lot of students have to build that relationship with their faculty and even administrators as well, right, to receive some of those student services. And it's really hard for the student to open up to a stranger in person, let alone over email or over a Zoom call or a phone call, right? So, you know, those relationships are not being built, and students are not getting access to those resources and that help and support system that they so desperately need. Thank you.
Yeah. A friend of mine actually recently, he works in the student government, so he has relationships with the deans and the chairs on campus, and he had a problem with one of the professors, and because he knew the kind of like the process of how to advocate for himself, he was able to advocate for himself, and he got the grades that he deserved to get. So he got an 8 on the paper, but because of the online situation, there was a technical difficulty that the professor decided to give him a D on that paper because he submitted in 2 minutes late, and then he got a D. And so he needed to go to the chair and then the dean to advocate that he actually didn't submit late, because on Google Docs it shows that he finished it on time, but because his internet wasn't stable, so he couldn't submit it. So those are the things that for students who are involved in student government, they have more knowledge, and many students, they don't really know the process to advocate for themselves. So I'm gonna move up to the last question, and it will be like similar to the other one, but a little bit broader. And I'm gonna start off with Steve. So what support would you recommend that the college administrators or faculty provide to help students succeed during this time?
So to answer this question, I really want to emphasize Genevieve's point about students facing emergencies nearly every day, or whatever the cases may be. And so I would ask for my professors to not only record all their lectures, but also post their lectures so that their lectures are available to students and accessible to students. And I know that for some professors, this may be a little difficult because it might be harder for students to consistently come to lecture every day or whenever that's scheduled. And students who choose to attend class asynchronously, they might push off all the work towards the end of the week or towards the end of the quarter, semester, whatever it may be. And it's gonna be harder for them to catch up. But for me personally, as my classes are heavily STEM-based, it's really helpful when I can go to a certain problem or concept that my professor was explaining and just kind of rewatch so that I can fully understand what my professor was trying to teach at that moment. And also because of emergencies happening day by day and our priorities having to shift, I find it really helpful as well to when my professors post recordings so that I can rewatch later at night if I wasn't able to initially do so during the day or during the scheduled time. And so that's something that would really help me as a student.
Okay, awesome. And then how about Genevieve or Cora or Leo? Do you want to add on?
Yeah, so one of the things that I would really recommend for our college administrators to figure out is that I attend a college in the LACCD district, which is condenses of 9 colleges. One of our nearby colleges is Santa Monica College. And Santa Monica College, what they do is when it comes to enrolling for either summer or fall courses, it tells the student in the description how the professor is going to take on lecturing, whether they're going to do it in a regular, every other day in time type of, strategy like you would normally in a regular in-person course, or if you're going to do it, once a week, or just not do Zoom at all and just, post the instructions on modules and on Canvas. That's something that I would recommend that all colleges do across the board because it really allows students with all types of schedules, whether you're a parent, whether you're a student who works a job in the mornings, or whether you just don't have time or peace and quiet like I do during the daytime. And it really allows the student to really, choose their own schedule and understand what they're going to be walking into for that course. Because as everyone here mentioned, this whole transition online, some of our professors did do Zoom during our regular, class times like mine do. But there are some that don't do Zoom at all, or some that just meet once a week. That, really makes it unstable for students to really navigate how they're going to take on, making sure that they're there in class or, get the recording afterwards. So having that little disclaimer, I would call it, in the description really lets the student know, okay, I can schedule this class on a Monday and Wednesday schedule, and then I could have Tuesday and Thursday to work and, take care of home business and that kind of stuff. Because it allows the student to really plan out their future for that semester or quarter. And it gives them, time to get ready, get things in order so that way they understand that once they walk in, boom, I know what I'm expecting. There is no oh, okay, I wasn't expecting to not have classes. I can't take these classes. I need that interaction. It just lets us know more transparency to know what classes we're going to be taking and if we're going to have lecture or not. And that really helps students really, being able to get things in order and give them a little bit more of control during a very difficult time.
Yeah. And then do you want to add anything else, Genevieve and Cora, or that covers?
Yes, I would like to add, I think that it's really important that professors also get the proper training. I cannot speak for any other campuses. I as well attend ELAC. I can only speak for ELAC's campus, but we had our spring break pushed up a week, and in that week is when our professors got training for Zoom. So it was literally that week of spring break, and then classes started. And I do not think that that was adequate time for our professors to get the necessary training that they need so that they can adequately do their jobs, and so that they don't have like connection issues or issues uploading or issues with assignments. A big part of the disparity here is that the professors as well are struggling like students, and us as students, we turn to professors to have the answers, not only the answers, you know, for lectures, but the answers for grading and policies and things like that. So I believe that our professors need to be better prepared. They need to go through more training, especially those that have never done online before, like my math professor, have never used Canvas before, so that can make it easier for not only professors, but for students. As well as I believe that it's important that the LACCD district make online classes more accessible. Those that took online classes before took them by choice because they knew they had the necessities to succeed in that class. They had reliable internet. They had a reliable form of technology, computer, tablet, what have you, to join these classes. Many students have never taken online classes before because they knew they did not have the proper necessities to succeed and excel in an online class. And once again, I would like to bring up the data that was mentioned earlier, just so that you can connect it with a face, as we've been mentioning that we are dealing with these problems. 21% of students lack a reliable internet source. Multiple times during this meeting, I've gotten a sign on my Zoom that my internet is weak. I have like the best internet. I have like some really cheap internet that's like $21 a month. And at times when I'm in Zoom, it kicks me out because I don't have the most reliable internet. Right now, it even says your internet connection is unstable. Right now, as I'm explaining that, that's popping up. And then 17% of students lack a reliable technology to be able to attend class or turn in coursework. I had to sign up for a Chromebook, and a Chromebook that was provided to me by my campus. I remember I signed up for one, and I remember showing up that day to get a laptop because class started in 2 days, and they didn't have a laptop for me. It wasn't until a month into classes that I got a laptop. Had I not had someone to lend me their computer, how would I have attended class? How would I have turned in my coursework? My math professor, because he has not received the proper training to know how to use Canvas, he doesn't upload his tests where you could take the test on there. No, we have to download a PDF, print out the work or write it down, take a picture of it, convert it to a PDF file, and then submit it to him. That is not something that I should have to do, and that's not something that he should have to deal with either. He struggles where he says, hey, you know, so-and-so, your PDF, it didn't want to open, or the file is locked, or this and that. Like, it also makes it harder on him. So we need to have, oh, I apologize. Okay, I will end, but we just need to have the accessibility on both ends.
Okay. And then Genevieve, do you want to add anything else, or did that cover your points?
Thank you. Yeah, really quickly, kind of what Leo said and about some ways that grades have been handled. So I've heard from faculty who've proposed different things like contract grading, which is where, I mean, from the beginning, like both Leo and Cora talked about, the most important thing is, I think, communication between the faculty and the students about, you know, the professors' limitations with technology, about what they're struggling with, about their, you know, other time constraints, and about, you know, the content. And in some places, students have pushed for syllabi to be published at registration time so students know what they're kind of getting into before they register. But having open communication where the faculty member also listens to students and asks them what they're going through and what they need, and you know what their life circumstances are like. I was really surprised to find out this quarter that most professors don't know what their students' lives are like outside of class, and so they, you know, just don't consider it. But it goes such a long way, and this idea of contract grading is like you kind of together set the expectations for the course and for what the grades will be based on and what assignments are reasonable and effective for the course. And I've had one professor do something like this in my time at community college, and it was the most, you know, validating, motivating circumstance ever, because when the grades are somewhat arbitrary, like right now I have a professor struggling with technology, didn't make a syllabus, didn't send out a syllabus, and has been randomly, you know, sending us quizzes. This week it was 4, last week it was 6 quizzes and a midterm with 2 days of warning. And he hasn't set the grading scale yet, so I have no idea what to expect for that class. And that's an extreme example, but basically it's just really important that we start with the place of transparency and recognizing both the limitations on the student side and the professor side, and also recognizing grades are super high stakes for students. Like, these are going to determine our ability to transfer, our ability to graduate, our ability to get jobs. They represent so much to us. And if you don't get your higher education, I mean, we talk about the community colleges as social mobility in California, but like, think about it, okay? Especially for students coming from low-income backgrounds or first generation, community college is, you know, it's kind of the last best chance that anybody in California has to, at this point, basically meet their basic needs. Like, you need a higher education to do that. And so if there are arbitrary things, especially now during a pandemic, and we want to act like it's okay to have a harsh business as usual grading idea, when we know that even in a normal term, grading tends to be biased and kind of like a very reductive measure of the learning experience and what's valuable about college, we're going to lose a lot of students. And, you know, getting a bad grade this quarter, it may just seem like, oh, you know, why aren't you just happy with a B or a C? You know, we're all going through a pandemic. People should be merciful. It has such a weight on our future and our ability to have stability in the future. And we're also, as I said earlier, we are watching that prospect of stability. Sorry, slide down. All right, that's all. Just communication.
I want to just add to Genevieve's point is that the grades also, and the courses also kind of determine, you know, scholarship eligibility, right? And grants and funding and things like that, as well as internships, right? If you were to get an internship, you have to take a certain class that, you know, if you can't take it, you can't get that internship. So, you know, there are a lot of, you know, implications around grading, and I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah. And with that, that was the last question. And I hope that those answers were able to provide you with a lot of good insights about what our students are facing. And with that, I will pass the floor back to Danny.
Okay. So I just want to quickly, we're going to transition into kind of our role in the SSCCC, what our commitments are, and what we plan to do forward in advocacy. So I'll actually hand it off to our Vice President of Legislative Affairs, Amine Moznine. Amine.
Sorry about that. We were having just a bit of difficulty with the sound, but hello, everybody. Amine, I handle the legislative side of things over at the SSCCC. And what that really means is I get to take a lot of credit for all the wonderful stuff, a lot of great student leaders like you see on this call do at the local level, and then hopefully facilitate some of it at the statewide level as we try to turn that local action into statewide change. So next we want to talk about some of the conclusions that we've taken away from this, as well as the SSCCC's commitments moving forward. I think I want to especially elevate what Genevieve mentioned earlier, which is, if anything, this survey skews conservative. So one of the major things that we need to continue to do is to uplift and advocate for student populations that don't necessarily have the ability to do so by themselves, as well as to continue to gather concerns and elevate them throughout the system. Obviously, those of you who are familiar with the community college system know that it can be very disparate at times. And so one of the main things that I see the SSCCC is being able to do is gliding over all of those differences and creating some level of equity across the state. So to that end, continuing to uplift student goals and voices and to continue to advocate within coalitions, within our system, and within the state. We've done that to a large extent. We've been in constant communication with our chancellor's office, but continuing to advocate within the legislature, which we've also been doing, and related governmental bodies will be important. And some of our commitments are outlined on that slide that you see in front of you. Advocating for the resources students acutely need to support their success. You can kind of just chalk that up under the idea of basic needs. Going forward, I think that more so than many issues is going to be one of the primary things that we look towards solving, is trying to alleviate some of the material stresses that our students have, whether that be housing, food, or educational insecurity and differences in access. And then on the other side too, taking all of the change that we learned about, all the fantastic resources that system and statewide partners have set up, and disseminating that on the opposite end towards the students and putting students in contact with relevant actors who can help advance their concerns. Those are just some of the conclusions and some of the commitments that the SSCCC has made going forward. And hopefully those of you who are on the line who can continue to help us with that mission, we'd appreciate that help and we'd love that help. Danny, Julie, Manon, anything else you guys want to touch on before I move on? Okay. All right. In which case, next slide, please, Julie. Perfect. We've chalked up some recommendations, and obviously these veer on the side of broad because we do understand that for something like this, a situation that's constantly changing and shifting, it's very hard to be prescriptive and have, you know, a one-size-fits-all solution. But we've chalked it up into 3 different groups: the Chancellor's Office, local districts and college administrations, and the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges. And they all kind of fall under the same idea of uplifting student voices and paying attention to the issues that students most vitally face. But they all have the same branch of working both statewide and locally to ensure that students are included in policy decisions affecting them, as well as in participatory governance conversations, and working with students and faculty to improve the online course success and completion rate by addressing student challenges. One of the things I'm really proud of is how well our system has adapted, at least in the areas that I've been introduced to. It should surprise nobody to say that our system does, you know, the most with the least amount of resources. So the way that we've pivoted has been impressive, but there's still a massive amount of work that needs to be done on that front. And that's somewhere I think, especially that kind of top-down focus can be found. Just a second, sorry. So to get a bit more specific, for the Chancellor's Office, one of our main requests is to maintain and direct in regular communications with the SSCCC so that we can continue to disseminate information. They've been fantastic at that, as well as within Consultation Council, but continuing that and making sure that as the SSCCC goes through some internal changes, that line of communication is not broken. And also, more vitally, for that participatory governance aspect, making sure that there are students on all the relevant committees and task forces that are being created, all the ad hocs that are, you know, sprouting up to handle this crisis, and making sure that students are still kept within the loop. For local districts and college administrations, we want to ensure that student representatives, again, are included in the shared governance side of things. While we understand that a lot of decisions need to be made at a more granular level, we still think that there should be student representation at that granular level. And then for the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges, working with the SSCCC to help inform faculty statewide of student challenges and needs regarding the online environment. That's somewhere where we feel we have obviously a bit of expertise, having to have learned within the system. And as it looks like we're going to be continuing down the line, we do want to make sure that any changes are implemented in a timely and effective manner. And then continuing to work on the opposite end so that students are more cognizant of what faculty need as well, and so that we can continue to provide a unified front as we kind of advocate in front of the legislature, which takes me to the next slide. Sorry. The call to action. You know, essentially, a lot of this maybe doesn't come as direct news to a lot of the people on the line. I know it doesn't to the students. A lot of these issues are issues that we're well aware of. And all that really remains is to solve them. Now, that's obviously a lot easier said than done. And anybody who's aware of the kind of legislative landscape right now understands that we're in a really trying time. All sorts of norms and standards are being, turned on their heads, and a lot of important decisions are being made without precedent at snap speed. So our call to action is to continue to engage with us as we try to craft solutions for students. That means if you have knowledge of task force, groups in the higher education realm that are continuing to make decisions, putting us in contact so that we can put them in contact with students across the state, helping us advocate in front of the budget staff and the legislature. California is one of the biggest economies in the world, and it's a wealthy place. However, those resources need to be directed the right way. Those of you who watched the May revised drop this week noticed that there was hundreds of millions of dollars that were cut within our entire system. I think 9% overall cuts the community college system. Hear us when we say the old normal was not working. The new normal cannot be worse than the old normal, or we will never solve any of the problems that we're trying to solve. We were already underfunded. Putting us into this situation will make us even more underfunded. So helping us advocate in front of the Department of Finance, the governor's office, the state legislature, and so on and so forth is going to be vital. Top of the line for us specifically is going to be a $10 million ongoing ask for mental health funding. That more than any other issue we feel is unimpeachable and has the necessary statewide focus to be effective and create true change for a large amount of students, but helping us as we join coalitions to move forward on a lot of other issues like financial aid reform with the California Student Aid Commission and our own chancellor, or trying to get segments of our community college system like the library platform services saved are going to be important. So joining us in coalition advocacy, and then continuing to stay within the loop as the SSCCC moves through its own growing pains and continues to try to strategize and organize, as well as touching base with your own local community leaders and student leaders. Danny and myself and Manon, we really get a cushy role as far as student government goes, where we get to go to these, teleconferences and stuff and talk in front of crowds. But really it's these 4 student leaders that you see who are on the local ASOs, the local student trustees who are doing a lot of the lifting at the local level. And so I think touching base with your own local communities is maybe one of the final call of actions we want to make. But anybody else, please let me know if there's anything you guys feel I missed.
I think that's good then. Yeah. Okay. Next slide. All right, so this is the conclusion of our webinar and our town hall, where we're going to do some of the Q&As that you've all submitted. Before then, I just really want to quickly thank all the student participants in our panel today for opening up, being vulnerable, and talking about these real issues that students are facing. I don't think, we know how serious it is, and we're going to continue talking about these stories, and it might seem redundant at times. I know I've been in these discussions for a while now, but it still gets to me that these are real things happening to students, right? First-time generation in their family, or first generation American, and their education is being just shifted to something that they're not comfortable with, and they just have no ideas with, right? I mean, imagine a student coming from high school going to community college. Not only do they not have any relationships with faculty or administrators or even friends, they don't have no connection with the campus at all. That's their experience going into the fall semester, and that's not right. So definitely those are things that we have to continue to look for and try to build those gaps, bridge those gaps, and work do better to serve our students and do the best that we can. So going into the Q&A, I'll have our interim executive director, Dr. Julie Adams, who will kind of go through the questions there for us.
Thank you, Danny, and I'd like to express my thanks to all the student panelists and to the facilitators as well. You all did an excellent job. You've provided voice to those voices we included in our survey, and I appreciate your willingness to participate. There's about 12 questions, and I'll go through them. So the first one is, can any of the students speak to their preference for their classes? Do they prefer fully online with no required synchronous Zoom meetings, or do they prefer to have regularly scheduled Zoom meetings? Is meeting via Zoom at a certain time seen as a barrier. So those are kind of three complex, but if I can get one of the students to respond to this question very briefly. So raise your hand. Okay, Leo.
So to answer that question, me personally, I do prefer having regular, class time Zoom meetings, but it does depend on the student. It also depends on the students on how they're going about things. Like we mentioned, a lot of our students are parents. They have more responsibilities than they did prior to this pandemic. So I believe that each class should be based on a base-to-base schedule, because it just depends on the course that we're teaching, right? For a class more dense, like a lab science class, that might require more Zoom meetings than normal, as compared to a class that's like kinesiology, that might not need as many Zoom classes, if any. So it just depends on the student's, schedule, and also depends on the class that's being lectured. So it goes back to like that base to base, because it just depends on each class, on each student's schedule.
Yeah, and I want to add to that is, for me, I also enjoy having a set time to meet during Zoom. It just works better that way for myself, in that, when you have a set schedule, when you sign up for it, you want to stick to that because it works with your schedule. So that's why I prefer it a lot more better than that way. But again, as Leo said, it does depend on that student, and to be flexible in that case, right? It doesn't have to be mandated at a certain time. If you want to stay consistent, that is the way to go. But just also remember to be flexible and, work with the students, so that if they can't make it a few times throughout the semester, then you're not going to penalize them.
Cora?
To add to that, I just think that the training is important, so that, like Danny says, for students that can't make it, so that we can rewatch the recordings. I do think that in-person Zoom classes are helpful, especially for things like math and, like Leo mentioned, dense classes. But I think that there should be offered where some classes have Zoom, some classes have Zoom one day out of the week, and some classes are just fully online the way that they normally used to be. Just so that people that prefer Zoom, or prefer half and half, or prefer just only solely online, just reading like that, they can pick and choose what works best for them and what works best for their schedule.
Great, thank you, Cora. And I'm gonna target this one for Genevieve, because you mentioned transfer in your examples. How do you think community college in 4 years university should work on transfer credit and classes to be accepted beyond grades given during the pandemic?
That's a really good question. So I know during the pandemic now that the CSUs and UCs are accepting pass, no pass, it's very important that community colleges that are encouraging students to pass, no pass are also accepting that for their associate's degrees, because not all have made that switch. But I think that's kind of a big long-term question, because, with community colleges, so much of kind of the grading that we do is right now, I think, based off the ability to transfer and what, transfer institutions look for, but it is a larger ongoing conversation about how grading can be more meaningful and equitable. And I honestly don't really know what that looks like, but I think our faculty especially might have a better idea of how we can, consider the skills and holistic improvement that students go through. And then, because grades and degrees and everything, although they symbolize a lot, we know that they don't necessarily always translate to the same set of skills or the same kind of job skills. So especially if we have a generation of students who may not get their degrees, or who are significantly delayed in getting degrees, we do have to think of ways that we can, measure their learning and their skills that they do have, so that they're still employed. So yeah, it's a big overall question.
Yeah, does somebody else want to respond to that? Okay, then I'm going to ask the next question. Would you recommend having a synchronous or asynchronous type of classes? Allow students to meet in Zoom and faculty as classes, and also have flexibility to complete materials in a weekly, like an online class? That's a pretty long question. So somebody want to respond to that?
So that's exactly what I have currently. The majority of my classes assigns work on Mondays, and then all that work is due on Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. Um, I do recommend that professors do that synchronized type of classes where they meet, as a regular in-person time. For example, Monday and Wednesdays at 12 o'clock till 1:35. Um, and then, but have that lecture recorded for students who do not have access to internet during that time, or, have to do a different type of obligation during that time period to review it afterwards, and make it very accessible for students. So, like, for example, make a module that has all the recordings for every class lecture, very easy to look for, to make it as easy as for students as possible. And then, leaving that week for students to get the assignments done is greatly appreciated. It lets students, work at their own pace. I know there will be some that will, question about students doing everything last minute. I do want to say that for students who are, committed and who are, trying to get everything done as quickly as possible so they can, move on with their education, that is very good for them to have to give them that week period. Other students might take advantage of that, but the pros and cons, the pros definitely outweigh the cons in that opportunity, because students just need more time. And for those students who take advantage of that, there's always going to be that type of, students and everything in education, right? We had that before the pandemic. We're going to have it after that pandemic. But we have to accommodate all students during this epidemic, because this is very historic and a very uncertain time. So that week period is very, very appreciative, and it really does help students long term.
I would also,
Thank you, Leo. Oh,
I would
good.
just also advise that talk to your class first before deciding that, because I think one of the things that I have experienced, and maybe some of the other panelists have experienced, is that all the due dates are on one day, which, not saying that I'm going to do it at last minute, which causes a problem, but because it's all due in one day, it's a little bit of pressure on the student to try to get it completed. So having spread out due dates definitely would be a lot better, but definitely talk to your classes and your students to see what works best for them in terms of due dates.
Great, thank you. Did anybody else have another comment? Okay, I'll move on. We have more questions. Did anyone use the services of your learning center or online services for learning centers? Did anybody experience that?
Yes. So I personally am a student worker in my student services department in my college, and I work in the academic counseling office. So I'm very familiar and have the opportunity to really understand what we offer and, take advantage of that. A lot of their services have, experienced a lot of difficulties being transitioned online. I know that I have a lot of friends who are going to start off in college and are just, recent high school graduates. And I refer them to the learning centers and to, our welcome centers at our college. And they have been, very committed to doing everything they can possible to make everything online. But there has been difficulties, and there has been, setbacks for many of our high school seniors who can't, see a counselor as easily as it would be to do in person, or, get help and get mentorships that otherwise could be done very easily in person. So there is some drawbacks, and we are working, very hard to get that up and running as soon as possible. But I think with time and with patience, we can all get there. It's just best that we get there as soon as possible, then later on.
Great, thank you. Leo, did somebody else want to share? Go ahead, Cora.
Yes, and so Leo makes a good point about student services, but like many of the tutors and their students, so they're also dealing with the life of adjusting to a pandemic and online while still having to do their job. So then it kind of makes it makes it not only harder on their side to be able to allocate the time or to be able to give it the full energy, but also for students, because now there are many students that maybe who had not sought out tutoring before need the tutoring now. And so I find that I try to make an appointment for this, for that, and it's booked up. And then it's like, I'm part of EOPS and we have like privatized tutoring and counseling. Even that is booked up, where only members of that program can get access to those things. And even then I don't have access to it because so many of those things are booked up. So then it's like, well, where do I go? Because I can't just walk in anywhere. I can't just ask my friend who's good at math, like, hey, like, can we stay an hour or two after our classes? Like, can you hang out on campus for a bit and help me? I can't do that anymore because, well, one, I don't see them. And two, they're struggling themselves. I can't be like, hey, take time out of your crazy pandemic life to help me with my math when you are a full-time student, you are a student worker, you have to take care of your siblings, your parents, all of those things. So then the resources that we do have access to, we don't really have access to anymore. So it makes it so much harder for us to succeed.
Great, thank you, Cora. So I have a question. One question is, going off the needs in the survey results, I'm interested to know if your respective campuses have started to disperse CARES funding to students, and if so, has that process been easy for students yourself to access and understand? So I see Cora, you have your hand up, go ahead.
Yes, actually, but the way that we found out about the CARES, that money that they were handing out, or they were providing for those that needed it, was through other students finding out. We didn't get an email or something like that, or at least I didn't, and many of my friends didn't. So we would not have heard of it unless it was word of mouth. And then undocumented students weren't able to get access to those funds in the beginning. When I was fortunate enough that I did get some money, but even then, it was really nothing. I mean, it helped, yes, and that's not to sound ungrateful, but with all this pandemic and everything and all the financial setbacks that people are facing, it's not enough. And then for undocumented students, well, they had to wait, and they are even the most affected, because not only do they not get like financial aid, well, then they're also dealing with the life of an undocumented student, where many of our undocumented students are impoverished and come from impoverished communities. I do have friends that are undocumented that later were able to get access to some of the financial help that was being provided, but that was at a completely later date than when the rest of us who are citizens and do get financial aid got it. And it's just not the same. There's that inaccessibility there.
Thank you, Cora. And I see, Leo, you have your hand up, and then Amine.
Yes, so in our district, I worked very closely with the Board of Trustees in our district and also the district chancellor. And I advocated on behalf of all students to get that disbursements out as soon as possible. We met on a Tuesday, and by the following Wednesday, disbursements are already going out. Now, like Cora mentioned, there is a huge population of students that were left out of that disbursements. The CARES Act did not provide very heavy financial relief. It was very minimal. I know that when the first stimulus package went out to the majority of Americans, the average was about $1,200, right? Students were only getting about $300, and that is, we're very grateful for that amount. But for many students who don't have a job or lost their job, or in my case, a sole provider for our entire family, $300 is beneficial. It's very helpful, but not for long. That's about a week of groceries for us, for a family of 7, and that's a little bit of groceries. But then, how about our undocumented students, our students who are part of DACA, AB 540 students, who are in the same boat as we are, and probably worse off because, they don't qualify for any federal financial aid. And as California has, done, they have provided funds for our undocumented family members, but those funds are very hard to access. My father has been trying to call to those nonprofits that got the disbursements from the government, and has been waiting for the past 2 hours at a time before the phone calls hang up automatically. So, those nonprofits are heavily flooded with phone calls, and they are not situated in a place where they can handle that type of volume. So there is still difficulties. The money is there, but it's very difficult to reach that funds. So it helps, but it's not helping immediately as it was intended to do so.
Thanks, Leo. So Amine, you had something to add?
Yeah, I think both of the previous speakers touched on it well. But one, obviously, is these funds didn't go far enough. That's not to knock on the amount. It's just one of the realities is you have a lot of people put out of work with a lot more responsibilities and obligations, and a pandemic that seems like it's going to spread another 6 months at this rate. So that's just one of the unfortunate realities, is not enough money was given to our students. And I think it illustrates one of the other unfortunate facts, which is looking to the federal government for aid is going to be something that's really tricky from here on out, especially if it has strings attached that cut at the core of what California believes in and what our educational system is supposed to represent, when we can't even support our most vulnerable students. So to that extent, it calls to mind stuff like Governor Newsom making a lot of budget allocations dependent on federal dollars. I don't know that that's going to be the right approach, and I think we need to prepare for that approach not working, because I think news out of Washington might be pretty unfortunate. But if nobody else has, sorry?
I mean, I thank you for that. There's another question here that kind of leads into that I'd like you to respond to. It's the one that says, do you have specific legislation to advocate for, or do you need new proposals? Would you support solving the California revenue shortfalls with a tax on income of wealth at top 1%? So can you kind of touch on that as our legislative, our VP of Legislative Affairs?
Absolutely, I love that. So thank you for that question, whoever asked it. To quickly touch on the income tax, I would be in support of something like that completely off the record. However, I do understand that one of the major issues is California is a lot more dependent on income tax, and especially the top 10 to 1% of the population's income tax, which tends to be a lot more volatile. So I think that'd be a good measure, and I think reforming our tax code in general would be a good idea, but I don't know whether that would be the solution that would be the most effective at this point. But I'm getting sidetracked. For our specific proposals, we have 4 pieces of legislation that are still in action. We're really proud of that. Higher education in the Assembly went from over 100 bills to roughly 14. AB 2190 is to give our second Board of Governors student member a full vote. Currently, 1 member gets a vote, the second does not. It would fix that. It went through higher education on the consent file this past week or the week before. Time's starting to blend together in quarantine. AB 2388, this is one we're proud of, and it talks to some of the concerns that were mentioned. That goes to the consolidation of resources, basic needs centers. Essentially, you have 73 districts that have a lot of different resources, as it turns out. They're just really spread out. And if you're a student who's housing insecure, you maybe don't have all the time that you need to go research where all the resources are. This bill, AB 2388 by Berman, Basic Needs Centers, would consolidate those resources into one place on campus, create a basic needs coordinator who could also tell students where to go both on campus and outside of campus to triangulate. And it would also create an online portion for epidemics like this, when people are left out of their campuses and can't actually access the resources they need. It'd create an online option where students could get an online copy of whatever resources they need, or at least directions on how to access them. We have another one also by Berman, AB 2448. We're proud to be co-sponsoring that one with our partners in the faculty. That one goes to the lottery revenue. It would essentially loosen some of the restrictions on what lottery money in the community college system can be spent on. K through 14 systems in California get lottery funds. We have something like $90 million of those funds sitting untouched in our districts across the state. This would loosen those restrictions from being solely educational material touching the students to now basic needs resources that are directly touching the students. So stuff like rapid rehousing waivers, stuff like that, stuffing food pantries. And we think that's a good solution that helps loosen some of the restrictions that have made the lottery money too tight to spend, while not dipping into any pockets. The last one is SB 1232. We're proud to be co-sponsoring that with UCSA, the UC Student Association, and our counterparts in the UC system. What that one does is it takes the CalWorks program and it looks at the requirements, which are work requirements, and it says something like higher education, if you're spending over a certain amount of time within the classroom, should count towards some of your hours for work, thus increasing eligibility for work benefits and helping a lot of the people on our community college campuses who have to work while pursuing higher education, and especially those who are vulnerable populations like student parents or non-traditional students who are sometimes left out of the conversation. Speaking to the question about whether we'd be interested in more proposals, yes, absolutely. And even if we don't get around to it this time around, we can either take a stance of support or advocate on some level, or next year as we prepare a legislative platform, that can be taken into account as well.
Awesome. I mean, that's great. Well, we're at our time, and I'd like to say we still have some questions, and we'll find another way or another venue to respond to these questions and maybe post them up on our website with the responses. We appreciate all of you attending this webinar. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Danny, President Thirakul, so he can close us out.
Yeah, so it has been a great hour and a half. I enjoyed listening to all these stories, and I enjoyed these questions and the answers that we were able to provide and the students were able to provide. Again, I want to thank all of you for attending and being patient with us. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but I think the most important part is that you called in and that you were listening to our stories and you listened to the challenges. And I hope you take that to heart and you share that with your fellow colleagues at your local campus. We have our survey results available, the full report on our website, again at www.studentsenatecc.org. Under our communications tab, it's available there for download. It highlights all the challenges that students are facing. And I want to just close it off by saying thank you to our student panelists again for the great job that you did in conveying those challenges, and that if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us via our website or email me at president@studentsenatecc.org. And thank you for attending.